I set up my research in a small cabin near the ocean. It was just me and my data, trying to understand whale migrations. I had been a marine biologist for years, and this summer was meant to be straightforward. But after my breakup, the isolation felt heavy. 2 nights ago, I was going through my records. My heart sank when I saw it. One massive blue whale had vanished from my data. I thought maybe it was a glitch. But something deep inside me felt uneasy. I couldn't shake the chill down my spine that I went outside to clear my head. The ocean was dark, and the waves crashed against the rocks. The moonlight shimmered on the water, but I felt like something was watching me. Then, I heard a sound that twisted my stomach. It wasn't right. I went back inside, hoping sleep would help. The next morning, I tried to focus on my research. Yet, as I worked, I noticed something was off. The birds were acting strange, diving wildly over the waves. Fish scattered like they were scared. "What is happening?" I muttered. I wanted to believe it was environmental, but deep down, I felt it was more sinister. That night, I stepped outside again. The wind howled in a way that made my skin crawl. The call came back, louder this time. My heart raced. I stepped closer to the water, straining to listen. The sound resonated through my bones, filled with anguish. I thought, what if the whales are in trouble? Then I overheard whispers from the locals. They spoke of ocean secrets and old legends. I didn't pay attention before, but now I could see the fear in their eyes. What do they know? I thought, but I shook the thought off and returned to my cabin. I lay in bed that night, doubts gnawing at me. Maybe the ocean is trying to warn me, I thought. I tried to fall asleep, but the whispers outside grew louder. It felt like they were calling to me. I couldn't resist the pull anymore. I opened the door, and the moonlight flickered. The air felt thick, almost electric. I had to know what was happening. As I stepped outside, I felt an urge to go to the water. Then, I saw it. The water shimmered, swirling in ways that didn't look right. I felt a force drawing me closer. I hesitated, fear flooding my veins. I glanced back at the cabin, and my stomach dropped. The things I had ignored were now undeniable, that I felt dread settle in as I returned my gaze to the ocean. Deep beneath, something stirred. I didn't know what it wanted, but I could sense danger lurking under the surface. The black water was calling me deeper, whispering secrets I was not meant to know. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to step back. The ocean roared with life, but not all of it was natural. I whispered to myself, what has happened to that whale? As the waves crashed, I realized I might not like the answer. The next morning, I woke to an unsettling feeling in the pit of my stomach. I couldn't shake the echo of the ocean's call from the night before. I forced myself to stick to my routine, but every sound from outside, every crash of a wave pulled at my attention. I needed to get answers, and the only place to start was the local community. I drove into town, feeling out of place among the bustle. The cafe where I often stopped was packed, so I hesitated at the entrance. Then I spotted Mrs. McCarthy, an older woman who had lived here her whole life. She was strong, her presence commanding despite her age. "Hey, Mrs. McCarthy," I called, forcing a smile. She turned, her expression unreadable. "What brings you here, dear?" I hesitated, unsure how to voice the growing fears I had. "I heard about some strange happenings at the ocean lately. Do you know anything about it?" Her face tightened. "You should be careful around the sea," she said, lower than usual. "It's got a mind of its own." I pressed on. "What do you mean? What happened to the whale I was tracking?" Her eyes widened, her voice barely a whisper. "That whale wasn't the only one. They've been disappearing." "Disappearing?" My pulse quickened. "What do you mean? No one wants to talk about it. Those who do often speak of curses and ancient stories." She shook her head, dismissing her own words as if they were too odd to be taken seriously. I could feel the weight of her words. "But I need to know. What kind of curse?" "Something dark," she murmured. "Old tales that say the ocean doesn't easily forgive." Fear crept in, chilling my spine. I thanked her and left, my heart pounding. I felt like I was wading deeper into something I didn't understand. That I spent the rest of the day researching local folklore. Most stories were cautionary tales, but one stood out. A legend of the deep ones, creatures rumored to dwell beneath the waves and guard secrets lost to time. Fishermen would whisper of sightings, but no one believed them. Until now, perhaps. That evening, I made my way back to the shore. The air felt different, charged. I stood at the edge, staring into the ink-black water, my heart racing as the moonlight danced atop the surface. What do you know? I muttered, half to myself. Suddenly, I heard a splash. I spun around, but it was just a gull overhead. As I turned back to the ocean, a loud, echoing cry pierced the night. It was that sound again. This time, it didn't seem to just resonate in my bones. It echoed in my mind. I was losing my grip on reality. Just then, a luminous shape broke the surface several yards from shore. My breath hitched. I rushed to the edge, straining to see. I could hardly believe my eyes. It was a massive shadow, almost like the outline of a whale, but different, twisted somehow. What was happening? That's when the water churned violently, and a tremendous force erupted from below, sending eerie waves crashing towards me. I stumbled back, fear gripping my chest. As the water roared, I felt a presence, something ancient and powerful that I wanted to run, but I was rooted in place. The very ground beneath me trembled as the shadow drew near. Whatever was brewing beneath the surface was not finished. Before I could gather my thoughts, a voice echoed in the dark, too low to decipher, but chilling enough to warn me. It whispered secrets that made the hairs on my arms stand up. In that moment, I felt the weight of what lay beneath the ocean. Whatever had made the whale vanish was about to reveal itself. The water calmed, but my heart raced. I stumbled back, not daring to take my eyes off the shadow that lingered just beneath the surface. My breath was shallow, each pulse of fear echoing in my ears as I fought the urge to flee. I felt like I was caught between two worlds, the solid ground beneath my feet and the dark, beckoning ocean before me. That voice lingered in my mind, haunting and cryptic. I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just an echo, but something more, an invitation or a warning. The shadow shifted subtly, drawing closer. I could see more than just its outline now. There were shapes within shapes, writhing and flowing as if the water itself was alive. I reached for my phone, needing to capture proof of this moment, but my hands trembled too much to focus. Before I could regain my composure, the shadow surged upward again, and with it came a burst of spray, soaking my face. It was then that I saw it, a glimpse of skin, glossy and dark, catching the moonlight for just a second. My heart stopped. It wasn't a whale. It was something different, something that pulled at the very fabric of my sanity. I took a step back, my mind racing. Mrs. McCarthy's words echoed in my head. The sea has a mind of its own. Whatever this creature was, it was tied to the stories of disappearing whales and the darker curses of the ocean. The legends didn't feel like mere tales anymore, they felt like a warning. Then, without thought, I turned and ran. Each stride felt like a race against something unfamiliar stalking me from behind. I sprinted across the sand and toward the small path leading back to the town. I could hear the waves crashing behind me, the whispering voice fading, but the fear had locked itself in my chest. How could this be happening? My resolve had driven me here, and yet, all I had found was dread. I stumbled through the darkness, each shadow flickering in the corner of my eye, filling my thoughts with drifting shapes and haunting echoes. When I finally reached my car, I fumbled with my keys, urgency making my fingers clumsy. Locking the doors behind me felt like a flimsy protection against what I had just encountered. I took a moment to breathe, to steady myself. That's when my phone buzzed in my pocket. My pulse raced again as I pulled it out, praying for a call from a friend or a message that would anchor me back to reality. Instead, it was a one-line text from the research team I'd reached out to. "We need to talk. It's urgent. Don't come back to the shore." I froze. I felt a chill crawl down my spine, realizing they knew something I didn't. It was time to go back, not to the ocean, but to the only other place that could hold the answers I sought. As I drove away from the beach, I couldn't shake the image of that shadow. A part of me felt I had crossed a threshold I couldn't uncross. What had I uncovered amidst the waves? And what would come of it? I needed to find out. But with each mile I drove, I felt the ocean's persistent whisper echoing in my mind. It would not let me go easily. The next morning, I barely slept. The shadow haunted my dreams, slipping away whenever I reached out. I woke with a sluggish head. The sunlight streaming through my window felt foreign, more oppressive than comforting. I had to figure out what to do next. I decided to drive to the university early. I needed to see Dr. Lewis, the lead researcher on the whale project. If anyone had answers, it would be him. I changed quickly, throwing on the same clothes I had worn the night before, still damp with the salt of the ocean. The drive felt longer than usual. My stomach twisted as I approached the familiar campus. Was I prepared for what I might discover? As I stepped out of the car, I noticed the air felt heavier than before, thicker with an unspoken tension. Dr. Lewis's office was a cluttered mess of papers and field notes, evidence of late nights spent researching. I knocked, and a moment later, he opened the door, his expression shifting from surprise to concern in an instant. "Good to see you, but you look like you've seen a ghost," he said, stepping aside to let me in. I could see he was already on edge. His sleeves were rolled up, and he had a steaming mug of coffee in hand. "I went to the beach last night," I admitted, shaky and unsure. His eyes widened, and he quickly closed the door behind me. "You need to be cautious. The ocean is not forgiving." His tone was grave, and I could tell he was holding back something important. "I saw something in the water," I said, pressing for answers. "A shadow." It felt alive, and I got this mysterious text from the research team saying not to go back to the shore. Dr. Lewis nodded slowly, as if weighing his words. "I need you to tell me exactly what happened." As I recounted the night's events, I could see his expression darken. He glanced at the door, almost like he expected someone to walk in at any moment and confirm our fears. "We have been tracking the disappearance of a whale for weeks now. The marks show something unnatural." "Unnatural?" I repeated. The words settled heavily in the room between us. "Yes, there have been unusual disturbances reported along the coast. Sounds in the water, noises that shouldn't exist. I suspect whatever you saw is related. You might have come across something dangerous." I felt the chill return. "What do you mean dangerous?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck, and pulled out a folder from his desk. When he opened it, I was met with photographs, the familiar shape of a whale, but also markings and symbols that looked ancient. My heart raced as I traced their curves with my finger. I found these in old maritime texts. They're linked to stories of the ocean's guardians. They feed on fear and despair, and they've been haunting this coastline for centuries. My breath caught in my throat. I was too deep now. There was no turning back. "What do I do?" Just then, a loud crash echoed from outside, the sound of shattering glass. We both jumped, exchanging worried glances. "Stay here," Dr. Lewis warned, and before I could argue, he rushed toward the door. I followed him out into the hallway when I suddenly felt the temperature drop. A shiver raced down my spine as I heard something, a low, drawn-out sound that seemed to resonate from the very walls around us. Then everything went dark. The lights flickered and died in the hallway, plunging us into darkness, the noise swirling louder. I wanted to scream, but as I felt my heart pound in fear, I knew the whispers of the ocean were not done with me yet. I blinked, trying to adjust my eyes to the overwhelming darkness. My pulse raced, each beat echoing in my ears. I couldn't see Dr. Lewis, but I could hear him mumbling something, his voice barely cutting through the thick silence. "Stay low," he said, a pinpoint of urgency in his tone. I crouched down, heart racing as I navigated through the hallway. It felt surreal. I could feel the air pulse around me, thick with unidentifiable energy. Suddenly, a loud crash came from behind the door we had just exited, sending me tumbling back to the ground. A heavy thud followed, and I felt the chill in the air deepen. Was it coming for us? "Dr. Lewis?" I whispered, panic flooding my voice. No answer. That I reached instinctively for my phone in my pocket, bringing the light to life. The small beam illuminated the hallway, but shadows danced at the edges, taunting me. "Dr. Lewis." I called again, louder this time, my voice trembling. Then, just in the periphery of my light, I saw it. A shape, fluid and dark, creeping down the hallway toward me. My breath caught in my throat as I turned to run back toward Dr. Lewis's office, but the shadow was faster. "Help!" I screamed, the sound muffled as I sprinted. The shadow loomed larger, stretching toward me like a hand reaching from the depths of the ocean, ready to pull me under. I collided with the office door, slamming it shut behind me. I flipped the lock, forcing myself to breathe as I leaned against the door. The darkness pulsed outside, but the light from my phone flickered across the room, showing only chaos. Papers took flight like they were caught in an unseen current, swirling around me. As I tried to steady myself, I glanced at the folder Dr. Lewis had shown me earlier. His research papers scattered across the floor. I dropped to my knees and started to gather up the documents. desperation driving my fingers as I searched for an answer. That S when I saw something I hadn't noticed before, a jotted note scribbled hastily on a piece of paper buried beneath a stack of notes. Don't engage with the guardians. They are drawn to your fear. Find the amulet. What was the amulet? My heart thundered. I needed to find Dr. Lewis. I couldn't stay locked up here. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open slightly, peeking into the hallway. The shadows seemed to hover and wait, but I couldn't see where Dr. Lewis had gone. A feeling of dread wrapped around me like a strange fog, but time was running out. I stepped out cautiously. As I moved, I noticed that the whispers had returned, louder now, almost crystal clear. They felt like fingers dancing along my skin, urging me to retreat. Find it, the voices chanted, and I flinched. Suddenly, a door slammed shut down the hall. My instincts screamed at me to run. The direction it had come from felt undeniable. Dr. Lewis. I shouted again, my voice straining. I had to find him and that amulet. Whatever was happening was only escalating, and I feared the worst. The shadow began to move again, slithering toward me as I took a step backward. Just then, from deep inside the building, I heard a faint cry. Help! I felt a rush of determination. It was Dr. Lewis. I ran, the echo of my footsteps joining the haunting whispers. As I turned the corner, I spotted a door slightly ajar at the end of the hall, the light inside giving me hope. I had to reach him before it was too late. I bolted down the hallway, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. I pushed the door open wider, praying it wouldn't creak and give away my position. The light flickered ominously, casting odd shapes across the floor. Dr. Lewis? I whispered as I stepped inside. The room was cluttered, filled with strange artifacts and books stacked haphazardly. My eyes caught a glimpse of his glasses on the desk, and my chest tightened with worry. Where was he? Just then, I noticed something shiny glinting in the corner of the room. I edged closer, cautiously navigating through the piles of paper. It was a small metal amulet, intricately designed with symbols I didn't recognize. My fingers brushed against its cool surface, and an electric jolt shot through me, momentarily stunning my senses. This must be the amulet Dr. Lewis mentioned in the note. Before I could examine it further, a loud crash echoed from the other end of the hall. I flinched, instinctively grabbing the amulet tighter. Whatever was out there was growing bolder. Dr. Lewis? I called again, voice shaking. The amulet felt heavy in my grip. Did it really hold any power against whatever was after me? I could hear the whispers again, more frantic this time, filling the air with urgency. Protect yourself. The voices cried out, pushing me to act that I decided to take the leap. I had to find Dr. Lewis. The shadows outside loomed closer, and I could feel the energy shift. Gathering my courage, I dashed back into the hallway, clutching the amulet as if it might shield me. I headed toward the sound of the crash, my heart pounding. The hallway felt longer, stretching out like a tunnel of fear. Dr. Lewis, I shouted, desperation fueling my voice. I didn't get a response, but I could hear a low rumble like something shifting, something alive. Suddenly, a door burst open to my left, and my breath caught. A figure stumbled out, face pale and eyes wide in disbelief. Get back, Dr. Lewis shouted, his voice hoarse. But before I could react, a darkness seeped from the doorway, merging into a swift shadow that lunged at us. Run, he yelled, and I could see him reaching for me just as the shadow swirled around his feet. I felt a surge of panic and instinctively raised the amulet, hoping for a miracle. The moment it caught the light, a blinding flash erupted, illuminating the darkness momentarily. I could see the shape's twisted features draw back, almost as if the light was pushing it away. Stay close to it, Dr. Lewis said, horror etched on his face. I didn't need to be told twice. I rushed to his side and held the amulet high, still unsure of how it worked, but knowing I needed to keep that darkness at bay. Where did it come from? He gasped, scanning the area for any sign of a retreating shadow. The guardians, I managed, breathless. They're drawn to our fear. We need to find a way out. As we stood our ground, I felt the pressure of the whispers enveloping us yet again. Find the amulet, they chanted, but I wasn't sure why they kept repeating it or how they knew about it. Dr. Lewis, what do we do now? I asked, glancing at the door we had just come from. His expression shifted, a mix of determination and fear. We don't have time to figure it out. We need to find the source. It's the only way to stop them. And just like that, The shadows shifted aggressively. I could feel the air crackle with energy. I looked at the amulet in my hand, feeling its weight pull at my resolve. What exactly was I getting us into? But as I turned to follow Dr. Lewis, I realized we weren't alone anymore. Something else was waiting for us in the dark. My breath hitched in my throat as I caught sight of the new presence emerging from the dark. It was unlike the shadowy forms we had encountered so far. This was a large figure, standing unnaturally still, its eyes glowing like embers in a hollowed-out face. "Get back!" Dr. Lewis shouted again, his voice frantic. I felt paralyzed, torn between flight and the urge to stay beside him. The shadows morphed around us, threatening to engulf us both. "Stay close to the amulet," I reminded him, raising it toward the figure. The dim light pulsed, and the glow from the amulet flickered as if it were responding to our fear. It seemed to stir something in the creature. It shifted, its body elongating and bending as if it were both human and something else entirely. "Dr. Lewis, what is that?" I whispered, desperate for answers. "It's one of them," he replied, his face pale. "A guardian. They can manifest our fears into something real. We have to keep moving." With a jolt of adrenaline, I turned and sprinted in the opposite direction. Dr. Lewis followed closely behind, but I could feel the air grow heavy with the weight of the entity closing in. The whispers were now a cacophony, urging us to understand. "Find the source," they chanted over and over. We rounded a corner, where the hallway branched out into several rooms, each one dark and threatening. The flickering light of the amulet cast eerie shadows that danced on the walls. I clutched it tighter, focusing on its energy, trying to keep the fear at bay. "Take the door at the end," Dr. Lewis shouted, his voice slicing through the growing panic. I nodded, my heart racing as we pushed past the thresholds, praying that the guardian didn't follow. The last door creaked open, revealing a room filled with more books and strange devices. Suddenly, an object caught my eye, a dusty globe on a pedestal. I rushed toward it, feeling a magnetic pull. Something struck me. It had faint markings similar to those on the amulet. "Dr. Lewis, look at this," I exclaimed, running my fingers over the globe's surface. "This could relate to the guardians." "Don't lose focus," he urged, glancing over his shoulder as shadows crept closer. "We need to," but before he could finish, the guardian slashed into the room, its form morphing, a menacing smile creeping across its distorted face. "Escape is futile," it hissed, and I felt every hair on my body stand on end. In an instant, I turned the amulet toward it, and a brilliance erupted, illuminating every corner of the darkened space. The guardian recoiled, but it wasn't enough. The shadows stirred violently around us. "We need to find the source now," I screamed as the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar. I wasn't sure what I would need to do, but the urgency pushed me forward. I had a growing sense that understanding the globe might be the key to stopping it. Then, out of the shadows, I noticed a glimmer beneath the globe. It was a narrow passageway leading down into darkness. "Down there," I yelled, feeling a strange pull. "It has to be connected." Without waiting for an answer, I grabbed Dr. Lewis's arm and pulled him toward it, desperation fueling my every step. But the guardian was close behind, its voice echoing hauntingly as it began to advance. "We won't survive this if we hesitate," I said, my heart racing. And with that, we plunged into the passage, leaving the light behind, praying it would lead us to salvation or, at the very least, a way to confront the nightmare waiting above. The passage closed in around us, swallowing our light as we descended. The air grew colder, each breath mixing with the musty scent of damp earth. I felt Dr. Lewis's presence beside me, a tether in this dark void. There was no turning back now. As we reached the bottom, I nearly stumbled. I raised the amulet, hoping it would give us a sense of direction. It glowed faintly, illuminating the walls, but the shadows seemed to cling to the stone like a living thing. In front of us, the tunnel opened up into a wider chamber. I took a cautious step and froze. What lay before us was a sprawling underground library, shelves lined with ancient tomes and scrolls. Faded maps adorned the walls, their markings resembling those on the globe. "Look at this place," I breathed, my voice barely a whisper. "It's incredible," Dr. Lewis agreed, his brow furrowing. "But we don't have time to explore. We need to find something that can help us stop that guardian." I nodded, but something caught my attention. A pedestal in the center of the room held an open book, its pages turning as if a breeze stirred them. My pulse quickened. Dr. Lewis, this might be it. I rushed to the pedestal, squinting to read the faded text. The letters were worn, but I could make out a few key phrases: guardians of fear, the source, and release. The words teased at something buried deep within my mind. It talks about the guardians. We have to figure out how to confront them. Dr. Lewis leaned closer, peering over my shoulder. This has to be connected to the amulet. It could reveal their vulnerabilities. I flipped through the fragile pages, squinting in the dim light. My heart raced as I stumbled upon a disturbing illustration: a massive guardian surrounded by shadows, reaching toward a smaller figure. It's feeding off fear, I said, my voice shaking. If we can cut off its source. Suddenly, I heard a rustling behind us. A flicker of movement in the shadows jolted me. Dr. Lewis, I gasped, fear surging through me. The guardian must have followed us down. Before I could react, the room darkened, the shadows thickening around us. The air felt heavy, swirling with whispers that mocked our plight. My grip tightened on the amulet, desperate for its glow to fend off the darkness. Focus on the book, Dr. Lewis yelled over the rising cacophony. It might help us summon more light. I returned my attention to the text, my fingers racing over the page. There has to be something, I muttered, anxiety gripping me. I found a passage that spoke of light banishing shadows, the specific incantation swirling in my mind like a distant echo. I could feel the amulet vibrating against my skin, almost urging me on. Here, I pointed to the words. It says we need to unite the energies of both artifacts. Let us try it, Dr. Lewis said. Keeping his eyes on the encroaching darkness, that I took a deep breath and began to recite the incantation, my voice quaking but resolute. As I spoke the words, the amulet flared to life brighter than ever before. A ray of light shot into the shadows, illuminating the room and forcing the guardian back, though it hissed angrily, refusing to surrender. Then, without warning, the ground shook. I realized with horror that something was still moving in the dark, something more than just the guardian. What now? Dr. Lewis shouted, panic slipping into his voice. That's when I saw it. An enormous figure emerging from the labyrinthine shadows, its eyes blazing with malevolence. I realized we were not alone in this nightmare. We had awakened something far worse. My heart raced as the immense figure emerged fully from the shadows. Its grotesque form twisted and writhed, every movement sending ripples of darkness around it. I could hardly make out its features, but I could see enough: jagged claws, a mouth lined with teeth that seemed too many for its head, and those gleaming eyes that promised nothing but chaos. Dr. Lewis, we need to go? I shouted, my voice hitting a panic pitch I didn't recognize. But he wouldn't budge, rooted in place by a mix of fear and overwhelming curiosity. We can't just leave. We need more information now. It's not just the guardian anymore. I pointed, my fingers trembling. We have to get out of here. Before he could respond, the floor shuddered again. Dust cascaded from the ceiling, and I saw the edges of the library warp as if the shadows were alive, reaching out in desperation. The guardian hissed, its anger fueled by our incantation. It wasn't just backing away. It was organizing, coordinating with the massive figure now confronting us. Together, they're stronger, Dr. Lewis said, realization dawning in his eyes, though I could see the fear lurking just beneath. Their connection feeds off our fear. If we don't break it. There was a tremendous crash as one of the shelves toppled, sending ancient tomes and scrolls scattering across the ground like fallen soldiers. The sound echoed in my ears, punctuating the urgency of our situation. Dr. Lewis, I yelled again, desperation clawing at my throat. We need to activate the amulet. Now. Just then, the air around us seemed to shimmer, a crackle of energy palpable against my skin. The amulet vibrated fiercely, illuminating the room even more intensely than before. I reached for Dr. Lewis. Maybe together we can channel its power. With a nod, he stepped beside me, the light pooling around us in a protective sphere, just as the towering figure lunged forward. The guardian roared, the sound vibrating through the floor and rattling my bones. Focus, Dr. Lewis shouted, locking his gaze onto the menace ahead of us. We have to concentrate and push back the fear. I swallowed hard, forcing my breathing to stabilize. In that moment, I remembered the names of those we had lost to fear, the faces that haunted our thoughts. I thought of all the individuals who had confronted their own demons and triumphed, and those who had not. That's it, I suddenly shouted, catching Dr. Lewis's attention. We can use their collective courage as a shield. Think of the people who overcame fear. The light from the amulet flickered for a moment, as if it were listening. I closed my eyes, visualizing their bravery, their strength. With renewed resolve, I shouted the names of those who fought against their inner demons, urging the light forward, uniting it with the will of those who had battled fear themselves. To my surprise, a resonating sound filled the chamber. It was a blend of whispers, echoes of courage intertwined with our own resolve. The darkness recoiled, and the two entities flinched as the light surged, radiating with an intensity one couldn't comprehend. But just as we began to gain the upper hand, the enormous figure let out a deafening roar, a sound that cut through the air like a knife. I realized then that we were merely delaying the inevitable. Keep pushing, Dr. Lewis encouraged through gritted teeth. I glanced one last time at the fearsome creature that towered over us. Despite the light, its eyes remained fixed on me, and in those depths, I saw another truth, a flicker of hunger mingled with an ancient resentment. That's when the word escaped my lips, unbidden yet potent. Release. As I spoke it, everything around us began to shake even harder. The library itself seemed to pulse with the energy we summoned. But I sensed we were at the brink of something monumental, either a breakthrough or an irreversible plunge into darkness. The ground beneath us split open, and the echoes of forgotten truths surged forward, leaving me with an unsettling feeling. I had unleashed something far greater than I could control, and now the cost lay just ahead. In the blink of an eye, the chamber erupted into blinding light. The echoes of courage surged like a tidal wave, crashing against the looming forms of the guardians. For a moment, it felt as if time itself had frozen. An uneasy stillness enveloped us as the shadows writhed and twisted, caught in the tempest of energy we had conjured. Hold on, Dr. Lewis shouted, gripping my shoulder. I could feel his tension, his determination mingling with my own fear. I focused on the light, willing it to drive away the darkness that resonated with my very soul. But the monstrous figure wasn't yielding. It flared its glowing eyes, a sinister glint that sent shivers down my spine. Suddenly, the library began to distort around us. Bookshelves warped, pages flew as though caught in a storm. Desperation coursed through me. We need to finish this, I shouted over the noise, but even my voice felt faint against the chaos erupting around us. Remember the incantation, Dr. Lewis urged, urgency overpowering our fear. I closed my eyes briefly, calling back the words I had recited earlier. They stirred in my mind like waves crashing into a shore. With newfound resolve, I opened my eyes wide and began to speak, focusing on the energy swirling between us, compelled by the rallying whispers of the brave. Guardians of fear, we call on the courage of those who stood against the abyss. The amulet pulsed in response, bathing us in a warm light. I could feel Dr. Lewis's strength alongside me, a tether binding our will to the victory we sought. The two beings twisted as the brightness increased, their forms writhing and flickering, caught in the confrontation between light and darkness. But even as we pressed forward, I felt the gravity of the situation tighten around my chest. The guardian roared raw, primal, and full of rage as the ground continued to tremble beneath our feet. I could feel it pulling me, urging me to succumb to despair, to allow the shadows to swallow me whole. No, I yelled, my voice carrying over the cacophony. I turned my focus inward, summoning every memory of resilience to fight back. I will not give in. As I spoke, a gust of wind burst forth from the amulet, striking the shadowy figures with such force that they flinched back. For an instant, it felt like we were gaining ground, the ethereal glow sweeping through the shadows like a cleansing tide. Together, Dr. Lewis urged, his voice steady even as the situation escalated. Remember, we are not alone. As our voices intertwined, the amulet radiated an intense light that engulfed the chamber. It felt as if a bridge had formed, a connection between the light we summoned and the very essence of what the guardians represented. Each whisper of courage that surrounded us grew louder, resonating with collective strength. Their voices merged into a single beam of luminous power escaping through the very fibers of the darkness. Then, everything shifted. The monstrous figure lunged forward, colliding with our shield of light. We braced ourselves as we felt the surge of energy fight against the shadow's monstrous strength. It attempted to lash out, but the light remained steady, illuminating each corner of the library. "Now, release," I shouted, the command echoing deep within me. The very air shimmered, vibrating with the intensity of our combined strength. The guardian howled, the sound punctuating the tension. Then suddenly a vortex of shadows erupted from it, spiraling away as its form wavered in a final desperate thrust. We forced the energy toward the core of the darkness, forcing it back. Then a blinding flash erupted as the light spilled forth, dispersing the shadows, piercing through layers of unearthly veils, banishing them once and for all. But as the lightning beam splintered into a million shards, it revealed a spiraling maelstrom at the heart of the chamber, a portal, twisting and thrumming with a dizzying energy. My heart stopped. Was it truly over, or had we opened something far worse? Dr. Lewis turned to me, uncertainty etched across his face. "What have we done?" he breathed, staring into the chaotic colors swirling within the portal. I couldn't answer. I could only feel the weight of the shadows drifting away, yet in their absence, my gut twisted knowing we had crossed paths with something unnatural, something ancient and powerful. "Whatever lies beyond, we must be ready," he said, his eyes darkening with the weight of our choices. I glanced back at the remnants of the battle, the scattered books, the overturned shelves, the remnants of fear that chased after us still. "Do you think we've truly defeated them?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The remnants of the shadows faded, but the echoes lingered, their threats still palpable. "Maybe we haven't," he replied, his voice steady but heavy with contemplation. "But that knowledge will always be with us now that some things aren't meant to be understood." As we stood amidst the remnants of the library, the remnants of what had been, of what was lost, and what we had to carry forward, the uncertainty weighed heavily on my heart. I knew we couldn't escape the consequences of our actions, whatever they might be, that I left the shadows behind me. But I could still feel their lingering presence, a reminder of the darkness lurking beneath the ocean's depths. And as I stepped forward, knowing we had no clear path ahead, I realized one truth. Questions would remain, and answers would be elusive. The ocean, with all its secrets and stories, was not finished with us yet. With each step away, I cast one last glance at the turbulent portal behind us, feeling the pull of mystery deep within. Some questions might never be answered. But as I walked with Dr. Lewis toward the dawn, a quiet understanding settled like the tide around me. The tale of the Guardians might echo long after we were gone. For now, though, we had survived perhaps the worst part. But what happens next was uncertain, just as all that lay beneath the surface of the ocean would always be. I moved forward, the weight of the amulet still heavy in my pocket, its secrets tethered to me for a lifetime. Would I ever truly escape the echoes of the ocean's call? Only time would tell.